Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net, and I wanted to address a question that comes up often. I get asked it in comments, I get asked it in live streams on my YouTube channel, and I never, even though I've answered this question multiple times, I've never made a video specifically about it. So hopefully, this will clarify my opinions on the entire thing. Traditional versus digital art tools. People ask me all the time, which is better? Which should I use? Which do you use? Why? What do you prefer? So, I've basically boiled down my opinions on this topic to three basic core opinions. Opinion number one, use what you want. Neither is better than the other. Opinion number two, it's easier to learn to draw traditionally first and then move to digital. Then opinion number three, revising and editing and manipulating your artwork is far easier digitally than it is traditionally. So opinion number one, the fact of the matter is that everybody in the world can tell you what you should or shouldn't use. The types of medium you want to use is a personal choice. And if you feel a strong calling to use digital and only use digital, and that works for you, then that's what you should do. And the same with digital. More and more these days, more and more people are at least using Photoshop, if not Illustrator and other programs, or Clip Studio Paint, to at least enhance their workflow, if not doing all of their work digitally. Even for myself, I tend to work, when I do my comics, I ink traditionally. And I do my rough layouts in pencil. But when I finish my rough layouts, what I do is I, instead of putting them on a light box to make correction, to look at the mirror image, flipping them, I draw them on vellum and then flip that so I can look through without using a light box. Staring through a light box hurts my eyes too much. After using it in my first graphic novel, drawing most of that on a light box, it just started bothering my eyes and I really needed to find a different way. So I switched to drawing on vellum, which is a paper that's thicker than tracing paper, but still semi-transparent enough that if you draw something and flip it over, you can see through and see that thing pretty clearly, the thing you drew on the other side. So I use vellum in place of a light box. And I make corrections looking at the mirror image because, as I've mentioned before, when you flip your drawings, look at the mirror image of it. It's a trick that's been around since the old masters, if not longer, where looking at the mirror image of something you're drawing or painting, a whole bunch of flaws that you don't normally see pop out at you. Your mind somehow tricks itself into thinking it's drawing correctly, and that trick is broken. That spell is broken when you look at the mirror image. Then after that, I scan the work in, and then I convert it to a light blue, kind of like a blue pencil, really. Sort of like actually I got the idea from traditional comic book inkers, who these days, instead of shipping pencils back and forth through FedEx, they'll just download scanned pencils that the penciler will scan and upload to an FTP server, and the inkers will scan those down, convert it to a light blue, print that out on Bristol and ink. And I realized, well, if they can do that, why shouldn't I do it? Why am I trying to waste my time trying to pencil something, do the layouts, blow those up, redraw them again, and then have to ink them a third time, or drawing them a third time being the inking. So instead, in that way, even though I work traditionally with the inking, I'm still using digital to help me with transferring from my layout stage. Digital allows me to skip over a penciling stage and just go right to inking, which is good for me because I'm kind of a loose penciler anyway, so there's not much point in me doing tight pencils. So just doing the one time with the layouts, that as long as I make all the corrections I want to make and get the anatomy and the volumes, the storytelling the way I want, that does the trick. Now, that's not to say that I will never create a comic book completely digitally. It's not to say that I will never get up to a point where I may end up doing my layouts digitally and still print them out on Bristol. I may at some point switch to doing them digitally. My main reason right now for sticking with traditional is because in my day job, I'm in front of a computer all day. And my eyes get tired looking at a monitor. Even now with better high-resolution monitors, you don't have to worry about necessarily, going blind from staring at the monitor, but you do get a bit of eye strain. You're staring into a bright light. And I just decided that for my personal work, I would rather not continue to stare at a monitor all day. I just find it more pleasurable to create artwork traditionally. So, like I said before, it's a personal choice. You to choose to do what you want to do, what you find fulfilling, what works best for you. You may use all digital, you may use a little digital, you may use no digital at all. And it's nobody's, don't look to anybody else for answers in terms of like what you should or shouldn't do. That's a personal choice. Now, going back to point number 2, it's easier to learn to draw traditionally first and then move to digital. This is not a scientific fact. It is purely anecdotal opinion. It's observational from my own personal experience and from watching other. The act of learning, actually learning anatomy, volume, proportion, figure drawing, perspective, all of those basic elements are probably the hardest part of being an illustrator, a comic book artist, a traditional visual draftsperson. Learning those basic elements of drawing are the most difficult. They require eye-hand coordination. They require actually training your hand in making marks to describe the things you're trying to describe. And it's challenging because you, on one hand, have the fact that you're learning mentally how to wrap your mind around these different volumes, these shapes, these concepts of describing a three-dimensional form in a two-dimensional space. And while you're trying to get your mind around what that should look like, compared to how you imagine it, compared to what comes out of your hand, you're also trying to train your hand and develop that muscle memory to make those marks instinctually so that eventually you will get to the point where you can draw things and you don't have to think so much about how to make the drawing look like what you want, and then you can think more about what it is you're trying to say with that drawing. You can think more about the more creative side, the composition, the type of energy you want the line weights to have. You can start getting into more expressive elements of drawing. And I do believe that that's easier to do when you're not also trying to learn how to get the technology to do what you want. The pencil, whether it's a charcoal pencil or regular graphite or even a mechanical pencil, the basic pencil is such a direct tool. There's very little resistance. There's very little of trying to get it to do what you want. I find even now when I'm drawing on a Cintiq, there's certain times when I can't get the lines to just do what I want. And I'm like, why? I can do this with ink. I can do this with a pencil. Why can't I make that drawing flow in just the way I want? Or I get that snap at the end of a line. Like there's certain little aspects that are not impossible to do digitally. But you have to also learn the digital tool. Learn your way around a stylus. Learn whether you need to have your brush settings set a certain way or whether you need to create custom brushes to get the line effects that you want. Or whether it's just a matter of, knowing when to rotate the canvas and using your whole shoulder and your whole arm to draw. Which, you should be doing that whether you're drawing traditionally or digitally anyway. But that said, getting the digital tool to do what you want is kind of like, in a way, drawing versus painting. I would say that painting is more complicated than drawing, but part of it is also the medium is slightly different and you're trying to get it to do things that in your mind you feel like it should be the same thing, but there's slight differences. Maybe painting isn't the best analogy because with painting you're dealing with more color, more value, texture, temperature. There's a whole wide variety. But if you're working digitally, you have to confront those things as well, unless you're expressly choosing to work in black and white. So there's so many more layers that add on when you're just learning how to draw, basically. Now, if you're like, I love drawing digitally, I can create all the images I want, or you just have decided this is what feels right to you, then you should go and you should do that anyway. Just because it might be easier to learn to draw. If digital's your your chosen medium, and you're as a student still learning to draw, but you want to learn to draw digitally, then go for it. Again, all of these, like I said, are personal choices. I can only speak to my opinions and what I believe works and what works best for me. And it doesn't mean you have to be exclusive about it. You can be learning to draw traditionally and split your time between focusing just on the basic traditional figure drawing or perspective or volumetric craft of drawing, with traditional tools or analog tools. And then you can also portion out part of your time to practice drawing digitally so that you're kind of building both skills concurrently. There's nothing wrong with that either. Now, on the third thing, revising and editing your artwork is far easier with digital tools than traditional. I think anybody that has drawn a comic book and they decide they want to detach a panel knows that you got to sit there and draw it on a separate piece of Bristol board. Got to make sure it's the same size, cut it out with an X-Acto blade, paste it on. Or, if you want to use digital, these days, I will draw things on a separate piece of Bristol, scan that in, and comp it in Photoshop. But the fact that when you're working digitally, you can just decide, oh, you know what, this panel needs to be larger. I'll make these other ones smaller to fit it. Or let me see what happens if I just shrink this hand down or adjust the proportions. Fixing figure drawings, once you already know the basics of figure drawing, if you're doing a drawing, you can see that things are wrong, you don't have to erase it. You can just say, oh, wait, this head's a little bit too big. I'm just going to lasso it and shrink it down a little bit. Clean up the neck area where it joins to the body. Bing, bang, boom. You're on your way. Whether it's making adjustments to storytelling, flipping panels, adding, removing, the ability to revise your artwork is endless when it comes to digital tools. And that's the great boon of digital. I very much use digital tools for revising my comic books, whether it's adding panels. Sometimes there's things that are easier for me to clean up, or painting white into panels that have a large area of black on it that it's easier for me to do digitally, or it looks better if I just paint it all black and then come in and draw the whites in Photoshop or whatever digital tool I'm using. Lettering, the fact that some people still letter their comic books traditionally, just hand lettering. I think I've tried that once many years ago, but my handwriting is so atrocious that digital lettering was the only way to go for me. So there's many different layers to which I use digital tools for editing, for revising, for enhancing. Sometimes it's just a matter of swapping out a character or swapping out a background in something where everything else in the panel is right, but there's just one thing that I said, I want it to be this instead of that. Of course, there's also coloring. Even though I'm doing my book in gray tones, but I do a lot of my art prints. I do that. I'll tend to color digitally as opposed to doing traditional paint. Of course, I miss painting, and I'm kind of trying to get back to doing a few more traditional paintings as well. So it's a mix for me. And who's to say that I may not incorporate even more digital into my work in the future? But for now, those are my basic opinions about traditional versus digital art tools. So for anyone who ever asked the question, I will point them to this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy these videos, please like and share them and subscribe to my channel. You can also support my videos and my YouTube channel on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Jeremy, that's patreon.com/GERIMI. You can go there and subscribe for as little as $1 a month. You can get additional bonus content, previews of upcoming comic book work, exclusive blog posts and artwork. And at higher tiers, you can get access to my existing comics as they come out, exclusive YouTube videos, and more. You can also go to my main website, jeremy.net. That's GERIMI.net. There you can find my comic books and artwork. You can purchase comics. You can find links to my newsletter that I send out once a week, and more. That's it for now. Go be creative.